Welcome, everyone. Today, we're going to be talking with three genetic counselors who recently took and successfully passed their board exam in March 2024. Um, Today's session, we're actually going to be talking with folks who have taken the exam more than once. And so thank you to Bri, Marisa, and Caitlin for being willing to talk with us today and to share your experience. I know that there's a lot of questions about folks taking the exam from folks taking the exam more than once who want to hear about, okay, what are the strategies that folks used the second time around? What things sort of worked or didn't work maybe the first time that sort of that you made changes on for the next time. And so I think that these are things that we're hoping to discuss today. But what I'd like to do is first just start off with introductions. We'll have everyone introduce themselves, sort of their names, where they went to school, their genetic counseling program, and their current position as well. And then we'll just get into those questions. Uh, I'll just start. So I'm Daniel Piquet. I am the director of StudyRare. I'm a clinical geneticist working in Fresno, California. So Caitlin is next on my screen.
Hi, I'm Caitlin. My pronouns are she, they. I graduated from UCSF, my genetic counseling program. And right now, since I just passed in March, I am still looking for employment, but working on publishing my research from my master's program.
So thank you. I think Marissa's next for me.
Yeah, hi, I'm Marissa. My pronouns are she, her. I graduated from Sarah Lawrence in 2023, and right now I'm working as a prenatal genetic counselor in New York in maternal fetal medicine.
Okay, thank you. And then Bree.
Hi, I'm Bri. My pronouns are she, her. I graduated in 2023 from the Wake Forest program in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Um, I am still at Wake Forest. I transitioned to be a prenatal genetic counselor at Wake Forest after graduation.
Awesome. Great. Thank you all for introducing yourselves. Um, we'll start with the first question. So first question is, how did your mindset shift between preparing for the first time you took the exam compared to the second? And we can start with Caitlin.
Yeah, so it was a really big shift for me. I think everyone kind of goes into their boards journey hoping that they'll pass the first time. And so it's definitely a lot to kind of just emotionally deal with. I think for me, that was the biggest part. Um, and so therapy was key for me. And then relying on like friends and loved ones and talking with my classmates and really like seeking out support, I think. And also just kind of normalizing not passing on the first go, and talking to other people who had also not passed the first time, and kind of just seeing that like no matter the twists and turns of your board's journey, it will work out, it will happen for you. And so I think my biggest mindset shift for like studying was like first getting my like mental health taken care of, and like getting myself like in a good space. And then it was actually realizing that I have to like study to the test. I don't need to study what I actually do need to know as a genetic counselor. I need to make sure that I'm studying the material as it is on the test, and that I'm like really working towards being a better standardized test taker. Because I have all the knowledge, it's all in here. I just need to be able to actually perform well on this exam. So that was like a big shift for me where I was like, I really actually need to focus on the exam in front of me, and what it will be focusing on rather than what I think I should be focusing on.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really important point too, that last point that you mentioned in terms of studying for the exam. I know that a lot of times it's what's on the exam is not necessarily reflective of what you'll be doing in practice or what's even done in practice. And so just kind of accepting that, I feel like and recognizing that that's the case is a really important step too, because it can allow you just to focus on the knowledge that the exam wants you to know, right? Which is important for passing. So
yeah, I would say that was something really big for me too, of like the focus of applying knowledge versus memorizing knowledge. I feel like going through, high school, undergrad, taking a couple of years off and then going right back into grad school, like it's really difficult to change that mindset of just like memorizing to put down something on paper, whereas the boards really focuses on applying a lot of knowledge, applying a lot of different concepts. So I think that was the expectation I set for myself of like, okay, I was capable of memorizing this stuff, but now it's changing it and shifting it so that I can apply it to what the question is asking of me, even if it's not a very practical application, like you were mentioning, Daniel. And then I think just being, like Caitlin was, being very gentle with myself, knowing that I am a capable genetic counselor, that I can, work with real life patients, and that these standardized settings or the standardized test is just that. It's standardized. It's not always going to be perfect. And I think even in the StudyRare classes that I took, that the instructors, Daniel, yourself, were saying like, this is not a real life scenario. This is a scenario that's made up, and it's a made up world, and just focusing on the fact that like whatever I say on the test is not reflective or have to be the end all be all of like what makes a genetic counselor. It's just something that this test is a box I have to check. And so that helped me sort of shift myself and make it a little bit easier to get through it the second time.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. No, thank you for sharing that. And Bri, I'm curious to hear your thoughts as well in terms of the same question.
Definitely. I think like very, very similar experiences post-test the first time, right? Of sort of feeling like it didn't go right. No one goes into the exam expecting, or that idea of not passing. I think a big sort of mind shift that I tried to do was thinking of it less as like a weakness that I didn't pass the first time, and more of a strength in the fact that you've had the experience now of really seeing literal exam questions, right? And having that experience and knowing what those exam questions look like and how they like to word things in a way that's different, right? From doing a practice exam. And so I tried to rely on that and rely on the fact that, okay, I've seen this before. I know what it looks like. I know what exam day looks like. I know all of, those sides of things, right? So I really tried to hone in on, those areas, right, that needed improvement.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really like what you said as well in terms of kind of viewing this in a positive light, viewing this as a strength. Challenges in any one's career are inevitable, right? And it can happen at the beginning of your career, at the middle, the end. So I think that this is, it's just one milestone, as I think, as you said, well, that just kind of needs to happen before you can, start practicing in most cases. So great. So the next question I have on my list. So what were some of the changes that you made in your study plan that you think were most successful, like most helpful for you?
Actually, reading the Green Book cover to cover was one of the biggest changes I made the second time I studied, and made personally, I think, a very big difference in how I was able to answer some of those questions on the board exam. I believe I had read like an outline, or like done just the few chapters that are sort of, quote unquote, recommended a lot of times, that if you're not going to read the whole thing, read these couple chapters here and there. But the second time I studied, I read it cover to cover, and I truly feel like that made a big difference in my able to reason through some of those more psychosocial leaning questions, the insurance type questions, the IRB ethical sort of questions. I think that was one of the biggest changes that I noticed personally.
I would definitely second that. I feel like it's so dry. Like it's so hard to read. The book is it's definitely a chore to read it cover to cover, but it is so worth it. And so for me, like figuring out like what's my timeline and then going week by week to fit in the chapters, and then taking notes with the chapters as well and going over those things, writing down definitions, because sometimes like the wording, like a definition that you think makes sense for a certain word is not the way that the exam defines that word. And they pull a lot from the Green Book, which is, I've always called it the Green Book, but I think it's called like the Practice of Genetic Counseling or something like that. But yeah, I would say that that makes a huge difference. I think some other things that I did was I didn't do any type of like study plan, like StudyRare or like any of the other courses that are offered. And so doing StudyRare was huge for me. I am someone who takes like a lot of like meticulous notes. And so I didn't attend the live sessions. I would watch the videos back. And it took like 4 hours per video to like fully go through everything, make flashcards, write notes, things like that. But that just spending that much time really deep in the material was super helpful for me. And then I think the other piece that was super important for me was doing practice exams as though it was the real test. And like Bri was saying, like now that I have this knowledge of like what the actual exam is like, I can really make sure that the practice exams that I'm doing really mirror the same test like scenarios. So like I wouldn't eat or drink for like 4 hours. Like during the exam, I would not stop the timer if I had to get up to go to the bathroom. And then making sure that I wasn't just doing half tests, I was really doing the full 200 questions to keep up like my stamina and make sure that I'm like still doing okay timing wise and that kind of thing. So I think that was also like a huge help the second time around.
Yeah, I definitely second the exam questions that I had access to. I was just sort of like the first time going through, seeing what I answered incorrectly and just leaving it at that. But I think the second time around, sort of guided by like the StudyRare presentations, I would go through and mark off or like take notes of like why each question was wrong and make sure that I could reason through why each answer was wrong. Because it's always those like, getting it down to two options, like what are the specific wording that's differentiating it between the two, because they do like to use, different extremes of languages or very like small, minute details that do matter for very specific diseases. So that helped me slow down and like read a lot better. I just always struggled with reading comprehension on standardized exams. So it helped me practice the skill of taking my time with it. I also just personally use like the exam content outline that ABGC provides. And with each topic, just sort of associate it with as many different like conditions or general practices of genetic counselors that I could do, and just kept it all in like one big leather notebook. Just sort of make sure I was touching on everything, know that I was at least understanding what each like outline point was trying to get across. And then even try to like find a couple of practice exam questions that I knew were associated with each, from the StudyRare ones, that was pretty easy, but then going into my own like bank of questions and finding my own questions to just sort of, keep as many practice questions as I could, and doing that on like a weekly basis.
No, that's great. And I think all of these strategies are things that we hear from a lot of the participants who take our course and who are successful in passing. Things like doing lots of practice questions, particularly in time settings, detailed reviews of the material, not only that we provide, but of other material as well, and just really trying to achieve a deeper level of understanding of many of these concepts, as well as kind of paying careful and close attention to the questions that are being asked, kind of how they're asking it, and doing sort of self-reflection on sort of why, because everybody answers questions, views questions differently. So like, why is it that you in particular got the question right or wrong, and seeing are there patterns over time, for example. that you can just be aware of that you may not have been aware of before. So really glad to hear all of these successful strategies. So our next question is about morale. So how did you maintain your morale and motivation throughout the study process, particularly for the second time around?
So I came from Sarah Lawrence, which is like historically one of the largest programs. So in just like my close-knit group of friends, there are 9 of us, which is already like the size of some GC programs. And about half of us passed the first time and half of us didn't pass. So those of us that didn't pass the second or the first time around, got together and had weekly study groups. And we really just hammered in like a lot of these exam questions. And we would, take take a practice exam, shoot for like 50 questions throughout the week at least, bring at least 5 to 10 that we didn't answer correctly that week, and sort of explain to the group, present them to the group, have the group answer them with like using a poll on Zoom, and then explain to the group like why they were or weren't correct. And so just having that like group mentality of like, we're all going to get through this together, like we're all teaching each other, we're all reviewing this, I think made it a lot easier the second time around. The first time around, we sort of like did our own thing. Second time around, I really relied on my classmates and friends to like keep that morale up, keep us motivated, and like keep moving forward.
Yeah, I feel like the morale the second time around was so tough to like get back up to like where it needs to be in order to like actually be doing meaningful studying. So I definitely don't want to like sugarcoat that for anyone who's going through like the first time, like finding out that they didn't pass. Like it is tough. Like definitely take a lot of time to like take care of yourself, like do something nice for yourself, like just try to get yourself back into that place. I think it's really easy for us to like speak really negatively about ourselves to ourselves and really kind of get into this like doom spiral of like, oh, well, if I didn't pass the first time, then I'll never pass. And like, what if I never get to be a genetic counselor? I feel like those kinds of thoughts like are super common. And it really is important, like Marisa was saying, like to like lean on other people who are in the same situation. I think specifically for our cycle of test takers, it was like the historic low of passing. And so I think that it didn't necessarily make me feel better, but I was like, okay, there are at least a lot of people who are kind of in the same boat as me. And I think that was really important, just realizing like, okay, I'm not the only one who didn't pass. And also like I can lean on other people to get through this. And I think the other thing too is just like for me personally, like I need my study sessions to like have an element of fun in them. And so I would make it like a trip. Like I would leave the house, I would like find a fun cafe that I'd never been to before. I'd get a fun drink. I'd have snacks and stuff and just like listening to music, like trying to make it as like enjoyable as possible to make me want to do it every day. And just trying to switch it up, like go to a different library today, go to a different cafe, like take breaks, go walk in the park, things like that. Just to really like make sure that it's not just kind of the same rote day after day like memorization, because there's no easier way to like kill morale.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think those feelings, right, for like the first couple months, especially after the exam, were like, lots of depression and anxiety, right, that a lot of people feel when they don't pass the first time. And I think a big thing I struggled with was realizing that studying the second time is like going to be different, and like that's okay. I think it was hard for me to sort of let go of how I studied before the first time. I felt like constantly, if I felt good about, a section of material and maybe did, well on that section of material the first time around on the exam, being like, well, do I need to study it as hard as I did the first time? Like, do I trust myself? I didn't pass. Like, all these thoughts of just like anxiety and that doom and gloom of just like, well, it wasn't enough to pass the first time, but I feel confident about this material, so I don't want to spend as much time on it this time, and working through, right, all of those things in your mind. And it was a bit of acceptance too, coming with the fact that, like, okay, like I know this. I've, been working in prenatal for a year now. Like, I probably don't need to spend, right, as much time on the prenatal stuff. And so that was like a big battle in my mind. And I think I leaned a lot on support from my colleagues, from my friends who'd, been through similar experiences when they were in school. I think, just like you had said earlier, Caitlin, therapy was a big help for me for sort of switching that mindset. And I think sort of that acceptance process is really what got me through. And I also split up my studying a lot more the second time around. I felt like I had longer study sessions. The first time I would study for like longer periods of time, where I found like a couple hours every day was better than like 8 hours on a Saturday, or something like that, that allowed me to retain more. And I felt like I was able to enjoy it a little bit, right? It didn't consume my entire day. It was just a couple hours of my day, or something like that. So that's a couple things I felt too.
Yeah. No, that's great. And I just want to reflect also on one theme I think that I heard throughout all of the responses, which was kind of a sort of a change or a shift in sort of space, like whether that be, and also environment. So whether that be kind of the physical environment, like whether it's Kaylin going to a new coffee shop every every day to study, whether it's Marissa having a making sure that she has her friend group, and that you guys are studying together, keeping each other motivated. Whether it's Bri kind of with this time with kind of the mental space, right, and just allowing time for reconciliation on that, from that perspective too. I think that those are all really important things to that you all did, that were intentional, and I think it sounds like that made you all successful this next time around. So I really appreciate you all sharing that. So we have one final question, which is, what advice would you share with folks who are taking the exam more than once?
I think, oh, Bri, did you want to go?
No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say something random and hope that it came to me.
Go ahead.
I think my biggest advice, and I think kind of what we've all been saying, is like really take this opportunity to like take care of yourself and your mental health first. And I think just as like our career field, like we put so much onto the boards exam. It feels like this giant thing, and it feels like this really big hurdle after we've already gone through like really rigorous training in our programs. But just realizing that it is just a test, and that you've taken tests before, and you already have all of the hours of studying from that first time now kind of like combined with your second session of studying. And so you have all of the knowledge. It's just about applying it, and figuring out like ways that can help you remember things better. Like for me, it was like really important to like learn mnemonics for a lot of the conditions and their symptoms and the natural history of everything. So just not being afraid to like try new study tactics, and then realizing that like you probably will have to try new study tactics because something didn't work the first time. And I think something that I didn't say earlier that was also important for me was staying on top of the disability accommodations that I needed. There's a whole like process to go through for that, but because I had the experience of taking the exam the first time, I realized I actually needed more accommodations. Most testing centers will give you like the over the ear like headphones to like block out noise, but mine weren't adjustable. And so I had like a migraine the entire time that I was taking the exam the first time. And so the second time I was able to get like the loop earplugs that are noise canceling. And I was able to add that to my accommodations, which like made a world of difference. But really just like being an advocate for yourself and like talking to ABGC and saying like, hey, this is a need for me. And making sure that you get that all set up prior to the exam so that you feel like, okay, yes, I've got this. I have everything in place for the exam that I need. And then just going into it, like, I feel like I didn't realize how important like positive visualization was for me, and just like instead of envisioning like all the terrible things that will happen if I don't pass, instead focusing on like imagining myself passing and imagining like how great it will be to celebrate and how good it will feel to like finally pass. I think that's so important too, going into it and just realizing like you have this, like you are good at what you do. You like graduated from an incredibly difficult master's program. You have everything that you need. It's just this one test that you have to get through, and you have everything that you need. It's just about like finally putting it together and just holding yourself up that whole time and knowing and believing in yourself and letting other people tell you that too, and hearing that from people who love you that say like, you're so smart, you have this, like it's just a test. So I think that's, I think my best advice.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's there's sort of it's okay, right, to like feel all of that sadness that comes with not passing. And I think there's a push a lot of times too in like our profession is lots of like type A overachiever types of people, right? And there's a push to sort of, okay, didn't pass this time, got to start studying again. I have to look at everything I did wrong the first time, and just allowing yourself to like mourn it for, a while. You don't have to start studying right again. And I think that alone, sort of allowing that space to feel and, be upset, be disappointed, those are all valid feelings to have, right? Not passing the first time. And I think knowing that it felt like the biggest thing, right, in my life at that moment that I didn't pass the first time. I was like, oh my gosh, my life is over. I didn't pass the first time. I have to take it again. What are people going to think of me? What are my colleagues going to think of me? All those questions come into your mind. But in reality, like looking back on it, right, almost a year ago now, I'm in a completely different place. And it's hard in that moment, right, to feel like it isn't like the biggest thing you've ever felt or experienced. And just knowing it will pass at some point, right? Pun intended. And I think that's one thought. My other thought is, I think we've all sort of said it, but something that really changed, that we've all touched on a little bit, is that reasoning process through questions. I can't emphasize enough how much of a difference I noticed even just taking the exam the second time, that I was just able to reason through questions better. And that I know that made a difference in my score. And I think the way to do that is the things we've talked about, right? Like talking out questions with people, taking detailed notes, right? Doing extensive practice exams, just having experience. If you have a job, right, you're going to naturally get more experience, right, the second time you take the exam. All of those things, I think, really helped sort of that shift from just memorization to, okay, I can actually reason my way through this whole question. So those were two things I had. And this test doesn't, like we've said, define your ability to be a genetic counselor, right? We're all capable. We all, like you said, graduated from rigorous programs. It's more learning, right? How to study to this test and how to do the best you can on it. So
yeah, I would say like the second time around, I think I was just more realistic with myself. I think the first time around, I really didn't know what to expect. I mean, you have that like 100 question practice test from ABGC, and that's really like the only hard example that I had at the time, the first time around. The second time around, I was like, okay, I know what the questions look like. I know that format. I know that I should be doing more of those application questions because I didn't do that the first time around. I know that I need to focus more on reading the green book because I didn't do that for the first time around. So it's okay to find, I wouldn't say, faults within yourself, but areas for improvement, and just being like, I know that now, stick with it. Don't use it as a derision of like, why didn't I know that the first time? It's like, no, we've gained that knowledge. We're going to work with that new knowledge now. And, best case scenario, you're already at a job like Bri and Caitlin were mentioning, you're learning on the job. There are some things that you don't have to spend as much time on. But then that means there's things that you have to spend more time on. So maybe, for myself, I started reviewing the prenatal conditions first, your classic trisomies and NIPTs and amnios, because I'm reviewing that every single day with my patients. And then I left those harder things that I struggle with, the thalassemias, the Bayes questions, like those are the things that you're repeating. So it's being realistic with yourself and what your capabilities are. Yourself best, how you study best, how you test take best, and making sure that you're incorporating all of that, and not thinking that this will be the time to try super duper new things, like try something new to make it work the second time around, but also be realistic with yourself of what is going to work best for you, or at least make a workable environment.
That's really fantastic, and that's I think that the advice that we just heard from everyone really just shows how forward thinking, first of all, you all are, and sort of willing to put things in a positive light, and willing to make changes and to make improvements, and that I think is the most important thing, right? And just with whatever it is that you're struggling with, right, trying to figure out a way to make it better, right? Not make it perfect, right? Even people who score very well on this exam will miss probably dozens of questions, potentially tens of questions. Nobody gets an absolutely perfect score, and that's not expected of anyone. And I think as Bri said, that there is some expectations. Some people feel like they have to, like everything's got to be perfect. Everybody's type A, but that's not the reality for this exam, and that mindset can actually hurt you going into an exam like this. I also just wanted to mention again that that this exam, these results, I think it's been said a couple times already, but it does not define you, does not define who you are or your capabilities as a genetic counselor. I know there's many fantastic genetic counselors who've taken the exam twice, 3 times, 4 times, and I think they're only the better off for it. They've had to actually struggle, right? And that I think makes them a better counselor at the end of the day. And I just want to say I'm personally very proud of all of you for for being so vulnerable. First of all, for coming on here, for sharing your story and sort of some of the advice that I think really why we're doing this is to help the next group of folks who are taking the exam, who might be retaking the exam in particular. And so really excited to see what you all do in the future. And we'll be colleagues. So I'm looking forward to staying in touch. So thank you all today.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, happy to help. Good luck, everyone.
Thank you.